In this video, we're going to look at a real-life scenario where you have a client who's still complaining of chronic fatigue even after taking an iron supplement recommended by her doctor because he said she has anemia. You'll see how wrong this advice was, and you'll be her hero when you uncover the real root cause and help her get her energy back. In this demo, we're going to go to Manage Test Results. We'll select Wilma Flintstone and click Show Test Results. This will bring up all the tests for Wilma Flintstone. In this scenario, we'll click the oldest one and we'll click the Analyze Test Results button here to look at the first analysis of her results. The Test Results Analysis panel appears after the client information. You'll see the red blood cell analysis panel. Based on the results of this test, we see that suboptimal blood oxygen delivery is highly likely. Suboptimal blood oxygen delivery refers to the diagnostic term anemia. In LabSmarts, we do not use diagnostic terms, making it safe for non-licensed practitioners to share the results with their clients, knowing that they're not diagnosing. Suboptimal blood oxygen delivery is determined by the values for red blood cells, hemoglobin, and hematocrit. And in this case, Wilma's values indicate that it is highly likely that she has suboptimal blood oxygen delivery. So it's highly likely that she has anemia. With a red blood cell size of microcytic determined by the value for MCV, mean corpuscular volume, and a color of hypochromic, determined by the value for MCHC, mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. From this, you know that she's not getting enough oxygen to her cells to make energy, but you don't know why just yet. The first clue is that she's likely to have an insufficiency in a nutrient needed to produce red blood cells, which is based on her greater than optimal value for RDW. You'll notice the multiple possible root causes here. Let's say Wilma's doctor noticed that her hemoglobin was below the lab range, said she had anemia, and told her to take an iron supplement without testing her iron panel. She tells you that she's been taking iron, but it's not helping. You can see here that iron insufficiency is not the only root cause of her microcytic hypochromic anemia. There are many others like vitamin A insufficiency, copper insufficiency, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, heme synthesis dysfunction, chronic blood loss, and acute or chronic infection. Without having values for the markers on the iron panel, specifically ferritin and percent saturation, we cannot narrow down the list of possible root causes any further, and more importantly, she should not be taking an iron supplement until she can get her iron panel tested. Before we look at the next test to show you what the possible root causes look like when we have values for the iron panel, let's look at these tabs that give you valuable insights regarding this analysis. You can use this information to help guide Wilma on her next steps. The Insights tab provides you with the logic and reasoning behind each of the items in the Insights panel. Let's look at a simple pattern that was identified: acute infection. We use the value for white blood cells to identify an acute or chronic infection as a possible root cause. In this case, her white blood cells were greater than optimal, indicating an acute infection. If we scroll down and look at the bar graph for white blood cells, we can see that the value is greater than optimal. If the value was less than optimal, it would show a chronic infection as a possible root cause instead. Let's look at a more complicated pattern: heme synthesis dysfunction, possibly caused by vitamin B6 insufficiency. Heme synthesis is the process of making heme. Heme synthesis dysfunction refers to the diagnostic term sideroblastic anemia, where the body has iron available but cannot make heme and therefore cannot make hemoglobin. Note again that we do not use diagnostic terms and only refer to the body system process. So not having enough heme to make hemoglobin for red blood cells is another possible root cause of microcytic hypochromic anemia. To take it a step further, heme synthesis requires vitamins B6 and zinc. The liver markers AST and ALT are B6 dependent enzymes. When one or both of these values are below optimal, it can indicate a B6 insufficiency. This is how we identified that B6 insufficiency is a possible root cause of heme synthesis dysfunction. The Additional Testing tab recommends additional testing that will help you narrow the list of possible root causes. You can use this information as justification to support your recommendations to Wilma that she needs to do more testing, specifically ferritin, iron, TIBC, and percent saturation. You can either have her ask her doctor to order them, you can have her order them on her own through companies like Direct Labs, or you can generate some additional revenue by offering testing as a service and use a company like Evexia Diagnostics to order them for her. The Further Considerations tab provides additional information about the possible root causes. Then we have the Signs and Symptoms tab, the Diet tab, the Lifestyle tab, and the Notes tab, where you can add additional notes about this analysis. Now let's get back to the superpower of LabSmarts. Let's look at this next test for Wilma with the same values for all of the markers, except this time she has values for her iron panel markers. You'll notice that the list of possible root causes is now narrowed down to just heme synthesis dysfunction, possibly caused by vitamin B6 insufficiency. Let's quickly look at the Insights tab to see how this information has also narrowed down to correlate to the items in the Insights panel. You'll see the pattern here we use for the values in the iron panel to justify this possible root cause of heme synthesis dysfunction. Also note that this box has changed from nutrient insufficiency is likely to inflammation is likely. Let's look at the markers in the iron panel below to see what caused these changes. You can see that serum iron, percent saturation, and ferritin are all above optimal, and TIBC, which represents total iron binding capacity, is slightly lower than optimal. This pattern indicates that there's more than enough iron in the serum, more than enough iron saturating the transferrin, and there's more than enough iron in storage based on the greater than optimal level of ferritin. So this pattern indicates that we do not have an iron insufficiency, but instead the iron cannot be converted to heme to make hemoglobin. And like we mentioned earlier, this can be a result of a vitamin B6 insufficiency based on the decreased levels of the B6 dependent enzymes AST and ALT. Having this knowledge would give you the confidence to recommend that she stop taking her iron supplement and instead recommend that she take a high dose vitamin B6 supplement as well as eat foods rich in B6. You can have her retest in 2 months and use the comparison feature of LabSmarts to quickly see how her new results compare to these results and prove to her and to yourself that your recommendations are working. Let's look at another test for Wilma with different values for the iron panel markers. In this case, there is iron insufficiency, but it's not because there's not enough iron, it's because there's an acute infection. The body is limiting the iron in the blood to keep it away from the infection. As we know, bacteria consume iron, and our bodies are smart enough to keep that iron away from the bacteria until the immune system can do its job. As we showed in the previous example, her white blood cells are greater than optimal, indicating an acute infection. The pattern that supports the possible root cause of inflammation comes from the values in the iron panel. You'll notice that serum iron is decreased along with TIBC and percent saturation. These confirm that the body is purposely keeping iron out of the serum. Also, TIBC is a surrogate marker of transferrin, the protein that carries around iron in the serum. Transferrin is a negative acute phase reactant and is decreased during inflammation. You'll notice an increased ferritin. Ferritin is an acute phase reactant and is elevated during inflammation. This elevated ferritin is also the reason why the box above changed from nutrient insufficiency is likely to inflammation is likely. Let me explain further why that's the case. Ferritin is an intracellular protein that's used to store iron, mainly in the liver and some in the spleen. It's not supposed to be in the serum. This ferritin marker here represents the serum ferritin, so it only has an association to the ferritin in the liver. There have been recent studies showing that when there's more than an optimal amount of ferritin in the serum, it indicates oxidative stress and inflammation as a result of tissue damage to the cells that are storing ferritin. When ferritin is released, it loses its iron, which becomes free-floating iron, which can cause the damage that we mentioned earlier. You can really prove your value to Wilma here by showing her why taking iron is not improving her condition, but actually could be making it worse.